Hello, my name's Chard deNiord. I'm the Poet Laureate of Vermont, and this is Poet Speak. I'm very happy to welcome Ross Thurber to the program today. Ross is a farmer. He lives in the local Brattleboro area here. He has been farming for many years. He's going to talk more about that, just how he mixes farming with writing poetry. So in a way, he's a little bit like Virgil and his pastime of writing poetry. I'm wondering how he actually weds the two, but he does. His poems have appeared in Bloodroot Literary Magazine, Chrysalis Reader, and Vermont Life. And they are anthologized in So Little Time, published by Green Writers Press. He has been awarded the Emily Mason Fellowship at the Vermont Studio Center in 2012. He lives in Brattleboro, Vermont with his family and owns and operates Lilac Ridge Farm, a third-generation organic dairy and diversified hill farm nestled in the foothills of the Green Mountains. Pioneer Species, his first book, is his first full-length collection, and I'm sure he's writing new poems. I should also mention that he's also been included in Roads Taken, which is the Vermont anthology of poems that Sid Lee, my predecessor as Poet Laureate, and put together a couple years ago of about 90 contemporary Vermont poets. So welcome.
Thank you,
So welcome, Ross. It's wonderful to have you here. I was wondering if we could just start by talking about when you started writing.
I've always been attracted to literature reading, and then, really, I think I had a memorable experience when I was in 8th grade. I grew up on our family farm and was doing some hunting.
Yeah.
And I realized that I was sitting on a stone wall, and I realized that I wasn't really hunting, and something else happened, and I ended up writing about that, and that was my sort of first memorable experience related to poetry. But then, I've always, read along, and ultimately, I finally took it seriously about 10 years ago.
Ah. Do you remember what that first poem was about? What just struck you as a sudden inspiration while you were hunting?
I think I was struck by the fact that I was sitting on a stone wall. There was a barbed wire fence that had was pretty rusty and neglected as well next to it, and trees were growing up along the field edge, and I realized that I was part of this continuity of wall builders, of farmers, of people that have tried different things through the years, and here I was, sort of an adolescent, just sort of saying, well, here's another opportunity.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Do you happen to have a poem in the book that is about that topic, or one that you might like to read just to start us off here?
I could read the first poem in the book is a good introduction to my poetry and,
Excellent.
and who I am.
Let's hear it.
I'd love to read it. So this is called Ground Truthed. Here is the long season of forgiveness. Love leaves only the lilies, wanting from a ghostly harvest. The fruit was too green to pick. The stalks were torn from their roots. Soon evening spring rains will be the blessing and commission. Skin will be night air. Dawn-throated songs begin each day. I am a poor king, bird on a branch, stone picker, woodsman, herdsman. My stable's small, my fields flinty, pitched and far from the river. My vestments made from the blotted leaves of trout lily, stitched with lichen fast to the rock. Sun skiff under a passing cloud, arranging coronation of grace and speed. Give up your grip, let down the floodgate. The middling mountains will hold your silt, wing flaps, meanders, passing concerns.
Nice, thank you. That's wonderful. Are you still writing? I know this book, which is called, I should say, Pioneer Species, is about 99% about your life on the farm. Are you still writing poems about the farm?
Yeah, though I mean, not all the poems that made it into this book were about the farm. So I think there's another collection, coming along. Certainly, my work life, the tempo of my life, dictates what I'm thinking about and how that folds into poetry. But you mentioned Virgil before, and my experience is a little different than dictating to servants who are writing down.
You don't have that luxury.
So I'm pretty much I'm on my own with this.
Yeah, I worked on a farm in Putney, actually, at the Putney School a little bit, and I know that it's just so time consuming. Do just all the chores that one has to do, especially with milking cows, which you have, right? You have a herd of about 40, 50 cows?
Yeah, so I think of it as, there's structure in a dairy farming life that is not unlike poetry, in that, there's constraints, there's a set sort of, there are margins on each end of the day, milking cows. I find that it's sort of an age-old, complementary, vocation.
I'm just trying to think of other poets, American poets specifically. Virgil goes back 2,000 years, but contemporary poets or local poets even who also farm, or that you might share a common interest with.
I can't think of. I mean, Wendell Berry obviously is. People make that connection a lot with. I'm actually more fond of his essays than I am of his poetry. But I was first influenced by, not necessarily farmers, but people that came to move to Vermont during that sort of back to the land period, like Jane Kenyon, Galway Canal, David Budbill.
In the 60s, late 50s, even early 70s, yes.
Yeah, so they weren't by any stretch, none of those poets would claim them to be farmers, but they certainly imbued themselves within the community, and Hayden Carruth too.
Of course,
that's a big one. So, and he was, I guess,
and
he's as closest.
Leland Kinsey.
Yeah. But Hayden Carruth worked as a hired hand,
right.
So his poetry was really, it affected me.
Right. Well, you grew up farming as well, because it's a third generation farm, right?
Yeah.
So you learned coming up as a kid, and then as a teenager.
I ended up going to, I spent a little time away after high school, and then I went to UVM, and I studied a sort of self-designed degree of sustainable agriculture, sort of linking together animal science, plant and soil science, forestry.
Right.
But I also audited some literature classes too along the way.
Right. This is interesting because you didn't go through any particular writing program. So many poets coming up today, have gone through an MFA program or some writing program before they actually publish a book or poems. So you had just been writing all along, and honing your skill as a poet. Did you ever study with anybody in particular while you were in school or after school?
No.
Who was a writer?
I mean, I had some friends about a decade ago. I started in a writing group, sort of a salon-style writing group with Suzanne Kingsbury, who used to live in the area.
Sure, yeah.
Novelist, and so that was my first introduction to sort of writing with other people. And
what was that like, by the way?
It was great. I mean, there's the room was full of affirmation. So that was nice.
That was nice.
But also, I was introduced to that whole collective sort of creative atmosphere that happens with a group of people that are sort of focused and open to creating,
Right.
works, and then reading them.
Right.
And then that idea of reading aloud also appealed to me.
Yeah.
Because poetry is part of that.
Anybody in your family a writer? I mean, that who encouraged you in particular, or?
James Thurber is a distant relative.
Oh, really?
But,
really?
that there's a few steps in between, but no one in my family that I know of has published anything.
So yeah, how distant is he on your father? He's obviously
distant,
on your father's side,
like
right?
several removed.
Yeah. He lived down in Connecticut.
Well, he originally was from Ohio.
From Ohio, and then he ended up in Northwestern.
I had
I think.
I had family members who were I had an aunt who studied at Columbia and was the dean at Lesley College,
which has a writing program.
Yeah. But not from a literary family. And what I am from is my family was active in religious services and church as a kid, growing up as a kid in that environment. So hearing a lot of hymns, scripture, that kind of thing.
Like Emily.
Yeah. Kind of fell. That was I think when I look back at it, hearing language sort of at a higher register and sort of with reverence, kind of put me into that state of mind.
And then you started writing your own hymns.
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah.
In the poetic sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. So would you say you have any particular influence, just poets you were reading on your own?
I think that all changes as life goes on and different things influence you at different times. I think early on, I mentioned David Badbill, Galway Canal, those writers.
Vermont poets, yeah.
But even in David Hinton, I also put him as a influential sort of presence, translating really old 700 AD sort of Chinese text to early Buddhist poetry. But I try to
David Badbill also thinking that way. Yes.
Yeah. But I also enjoy contemporary poets. I really like Tony Hoagland. Mary Carr just recently read Looney Bin Basketball. I was reading that with a friend recently, and it's just it's a beautiful poem.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for new influences.
Right. Well, would you mind reading another poem?
Sure.
Just anyone you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, I should just say that Pioneer Species is a collection of poems that are all organized, within the season with each season sort of representing a type of succession, a plant that is a pioneer species. A pioneer species is a type of specimen that is the first to arrive after there's been a disturbance, or either a man-made disturbance.
After a fire, maybe?
After a fire, after a clearing, that kind of thing. So
the poems are like the new species growing or emerging after.
Yeah, I mean that was sort of the part of the working metaphor. That this poem's called Eastertide, and this in some ways links that sort of spiritual element to the natural world. You can still see through the trees if you look through the patch of hardwoods. The farmhouse shines like a white boulder lodged between two old maples. Close by is a maroon barn with a new blue roof grafted like a hopeful scion. Across the mowing, two men pull brush to the walled edge. The heavier oak pieces they brace against their backs and pull. The lighter black cherry limbs they arrange in piles and carry in bundles. They remark to one another how much has changed when these trees fell like shadows into the snowy field, and they work just to keep their hands warm. This is the time of year when nature is in suspension, one said. You're fooled nothing is happening. This is the season that cleanses your palate, said the other. It seems that all you need is work, water, and air. Beyond the field, where the woods gather to the edge, as if any shoreline is a marvel, as if this is where the news will break. A grove of popple bends to do its washing. The petals on the new flowers mottle gray and wave in the light, breeze like white linen wrappings. Right.
No, it's wonderful, wonderful. What do you hear when you hear your poems out loud? A lot of poets.
Well, that poem I think of. I don't have too many poems where there's actually somebody else speaking, but I also wanted those voices to be not really too tethered to any particular person, so I think of like some of the voices in Robert Frost poems, like "Death of a Hired Man,"
right?
And that kind of language is kind of just out there, and it's just kind of floating.
Yeah. Speaking of Robert Frost, he wrote several kind of farm poems or country poems that had some terror in them.
Yeah.
Out, for instance, about the poor boy who cuts his hand off with a chainsaw, or the
buzzsaw.
Buzzsaw, as well as Death of a Hired Man and Home Burial, which is not really about a farm, but it's in a rural area where the death of a child. You have to confront those sorts of themes in your daily life, whether it's the death of an animal or something that happens. Is that true?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's part of the joyful moments that I find are the culmination of a fair amount of pain and suffering.
Right.
So I'm certainly don't shy away from acknowledging that, and that's all part of the experience, human experience, and not what's we are under duress, and so you never know when we're going to sort of elevate out of our situations.
Right.
It's kind of just part of the cycle of things.
Speaking of under duress, in this time when climate change and environmental concern is really at a peak, I read the New York Times today as a headline that human beings, as the article put it, are endangering 1 million species at this point, 1 million species, which will in turn impact human life profoundly, not just endangering them, but threatening their actual existence. Just as someone who lives so close to nature and to the ground and to both animal and plant life, how does that fact weigh on you, or I hate to use the word inspire you, but that's sort of what it is. Yeah.
Well, I think that you're always presented with daily challenges on a farm. There's small victories and small defeats every day, but I find that I find my calling to be a farmer and to sort of try to perform a lifestyle that has historic tradition, a diversified operation that uses the resources that we have in our little valley here just in West Brattleboro.
And it's an organic farm.
It's an organic farm, but it's so we have forest land in the sort of upper elevations that certainly helps protect erosion from the steeper grades are kept in woods so that they can capture all that moisture, but it also is a good place to produce maple syrup. And then lower down below the forests are upper pastures, and that's land that you can't till. You can't plow that land. It has ledge outcroppings.
Yeah, you're right.
It's wet in places, but that sort of performs. It's great grazing land. It produces grass. And then in the bottom of the valley, we have arable land where we grow vegetables, our hay land, that kind of thing. So I mean, that's the sort of personal act that I can do as a member of as a human, as a
single member of the community.
And the idea of sequestering carbon with perennial grass grazing, that kind of thing is a really positive type of farming that we can do. So I think of our situation, and how can we farm the best possible way we can. For me, that's as much of a crusade as I want to be on.
Yeah. Yeah. What more can you can do? Of course, you're writing as well. I mean, as well as farming, and
and writing is like a type of dispatch of some kind.
That's right. It's a good way to put it.
It's giving some new, a report.
Yeah, and even though the poems might not be directly about environmental crisis, they are still witnessing to the the age-old practice of farming, to responsible farming, to the land itself.
Yeah, I mean, they're vertically integrated.
Right, vertically integrated, yeah. You've got two wonderfully short poems on page 49 and 50. I was just wondering if you could read those and then just talk about them a little bit, about just, why you felt inclined to put these sort of too haiku almost into the book, as opposed to the other longer poems.
Yeah. Well, the first poem is called Animal Husbandry.
Big, huge topic.
Big topic.
3 lines.
3 lines. It's a haiku. Every day they lick the salt block just out of reach. My job, put it back.
Nice.
That's a distillation.
So is that, would you say that, I mean, some of David Hitton's translations might have inspired that, or David Budbill too?
Yeah, definitely. I think I think the process of distillation and reduction is kind of something I'm interested in. I come from Yankee stock. You try to make make things as communicable as
economical
possible.
Yeah.
And for reasons of sometimes it's cold out and you're talking, want to be efficient.
Why say more?
Yeah.
And Yankee farmers are notorious for not saying too much.
It's true.
Right.
It's true. I think Travels with Charlie, Steinbeck, popped through Vermont for a little bit. And he had this conversation with a Vermont farmer, and he used the phrase "contained animation," which I've always thought is the best way to capture a twinkle in somebody's eyes without saying a lot.
Yeah. Why say more?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the second poem is called, how do you say this? Hygge?
Hygge.
Oh, Hygge.
It's that.
Okay.
It's
spelled Hygge.
Yes, it's that whole. It's like taken off in pop culture now. The idea of contentment during winter and creating a life around that.
What's its etymology? Hygge.
It's either Norwegian. It's Scandinavian.
Oh, it's Scandinavian. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this is more of a domestic poem. Well, snow fills the grove, orchard blooms above the sink. Come, burrow in.
Yeah, read it again. Just nice to hear.
Well, snow fills the grove, orchid blooms above the sink. Come, burrow in.
Yeah, that's great. What was your inspiration for that?
I think finding comfort.
Contentment, you said, right?
Finding comfort.
Yeah.
I think that's a constant practice in the wintertime sometimes.
Yeah. Sit by the hearth.
Yeah, or at least imagine you're sitting by the hearth.
Right. Yeah. Great. I know you're working on some new poems, and you may have some with you or may not. But
I didn't bring any with me.
That's okay. But I know that someone mentioned to me, you could talk about this, correct me about this, that I think a filmmaker met you out in, was it Chester? Who wants to use some of your poems for a film about farming, is it, in Vermont?
Well, it's not about farming. It's about, and I've only just heard her sort of sketch about it, and it's place-based education and how that transforms into systems-based thinking. It seems like some really big topics that she's sort of tackling, and she's using the sort of town of Chester as a model for that. I'm not from Chester, but she found my book in Chester.
Well, the bookstore there.
So, anyways, she thought that some of the poems mirrored this sort of aesthetic that she was trying to go
Yeah.
for.
What is the? Could you talk a little bit about what is system-based
I don't
learning?
know. I don't
You
know.
know?
I mean, place-based education is.
Right. I
We
know.
used to call it one-room schoolhouse.
Right.
Right. No, I
Yeah.
think it's a lot more sophisticated than that.
With the internet now. Yeah.
And there is a professor at Antioch College. I may have his name wrong, but I think David Sobel.
It's familiar. Yeah.
And so I'm pretty sketchy on the details, but I was honored that she was interested in the poems.
Do you know what she's going to do at all, or how she's going to use the poems?
I think we're going to start in June. She's going to come and record a poem.
I see.
So I think she's interested in
Right.
seasonal. I think she wants to do a poem per
Right.
season, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of Antioch College, there's another professor there. I think he's retired now, named Tom Wessels, who wrote a wonderful book called "Reading the New England Landscape," who might be work with this fellow Sobels, I believe. And it sounds like something he'd be involved in too, as well. Do you know that book at all?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was a really well done book, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of myself and a lot of people that I know that have read it have changed how they look around in the woods, and
Yeah.
and just the idea of
Yeah.
what we see now is the consequence of other decisions that were made
Right.
earlier, and
Right.
and then this whole idea of pioneer species too, like
Yeah.
a stand of pine was
Right.
the first thing that
Yeah.
grew into
Yeah.
a pasture.
Yeah. I'm happy to do a little plug for that book in relation to yours. It's called "Reading the New England Landscape," and Tom will take you to a site somewhere that maybe used to be a grazing field, and he can tell you the whole history of that plot of land, and just based on the trees that are growing there, and the age of the trees, and the walls and so forth. It's really a wonderful book. Well, I'm also curious to know if you have like a set time when you write. I'm thinking back. I'm thinking again about your schedule.
Yeah.
You probably have to get up at 5 in the morning.
Yeah, I mean,
and
4:30 is like
the
when
cows are mooing.
Right.
and
No,
they
I
wanna
mean,
be-
we live a mile away from the farm, which is in the. Yeah, it's a really nice actually to be able to kind of be a little bit away, and
Yeah.
but my we still live on the farm, but
It's pretty. You're kind of right on the edge of Marlboro and Brattleboro, aren't you?
Marlboro, Guilford, Brattleboro, sort of all kind
Right.
of in that.
Right.
And Ames Hill Road. Is
Ames Hill Road. Yeah.
the back way to Marlboro.
Yeah.
But as far as writing, I find that inspiration comes while I'm working, while I'm moving around. A lot of writers will go for walks.
Yeah.
I'm walking a lot, just
Do
doing.
you carry
sort of
a pad of
chores.
paper in your overalls?
I don't have overalls. I do have a pad of paper. Occasionally, it doesn't take much paper. Just jotting down some ideas, and then I have a couple of just sort of workstations, I call them.
In the barn?
Different places.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I have our machine shop has a little spot. I have a little sort of summer shed ready to, and then I have a place with a sort of farm office with a wood stove in the wintertime.
Right.
But I think the ideal, if you're really taking writing serious, then you really have to keep
Just
regular hours in a way, and so
your own irregular hours.
yeah. But
Yeah.
a practice.
A practice, right? Right.
And so that I've managed to kind of work that into my life.
Yeah. Well, it's a 3-generation farm, you said? A third generation
Yeah,
farm?
I mean, my family's on both sides have been, here just at the revolution and on, that kind of thing.
That sounds like more than 3 generations.
Yeah, I mean, our particular farm is, my grandfather bought the farm in 1938.
Right.
And my grandmother was from Passaic, New Jersey, just outside of Manhattan. She had never been on a farm before, so it was an interesting dynamic for her to sort of come sight unseen.
Yeah, right.
To live in Depression era Vermont.
And did she bought the land?
No, my grandfather bought the land. He wooed her somehow magically,
To move up
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
Passaic? Yeah.
Yeah, she was from a large Dutch family.
Wow.
So it was a really bold, courageous move on her part, and she also just brought a lot of outside perspective to a family that probably hadn't had that before.
Right. Right.
Um,
But she ended up enjoying the Vermont
oh yeah,
farm life.
absolutely. Yeah. She was a wonderful presence in my life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she lived till 96.
Wow.
My grandfather died in his late 60s.
That
so.
must have been pretty recent that she died.
It was actually, time keeps ticking
Yeah,
by. It was early 2000s.
Well, it still seems recent to me.
Yeah,
but,
I know, me too. I know. My kids, would not say that's recent, but.
Just another farm question that may have something to do with your poetry as well. I mean, Vermont has lost how many dairies in the last?
Well, when we
10 years,
started in 1996,
20.
when I came back to the farm, there were 2,000 farms.
Dairy farms.
Yeah, dairy farms, and now there's like 700.
So over 1,000, 1,300.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
It's kind of disheartening.
Yeah.
And
a lot of these folks you must have known. I'm
absolutely.
thinking,
Yeah, so there are farms. We were sort of sandwiched in between a few farms growing up. So having farming neighbors, not only is there's that collective energy and sort of competition that even happens that makes farmers better.
But also camaraderie too.
Yeah, both.
Yeah.
Both. Both. And there's a sort of central part of the landscape on our farm is Round Mountain, and beautiful hiking trail that goes up to the top of it that we have conserved with our property. So it has public access; people can use it. But around that mountain, it's surrounded by sort of 3 family farms, and they all are in the same families. And my cousins has adapted quite well after dairy and is doing more maple sugaring and
they're still living there.
Still living there, still stewarding the land, taking care of it. But they're all those farms were dairy farms. So there was there was an actual community of people doing. It's a strange vocation. So it's nice to have neighbors that are doing the same thing. Yeah.
And so they're all gone. Besides, or you're the only one
the farms
left?
are all there, and
but not the cows.
But not the cows. There's some beef cows that have replaced them, but a different. It's a different. Not having.
Sounds like maybe an elegy is in store.
Well, I hope not.
No.
I mean,
just
still
for
hope
the
against
loss
hope.
that's already happened.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
Not for your farm. I'm just thinking of.
Well, even for. I even think of other farms too. I think things are always changing. There's always transition. It's there's so many layers of policy that we can't control that that are all driving this sort of but it's happening before our eyes.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, the time has gone by very quickly.
Okay.
I'm wondering if you could close with a poem.
Sure.
So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. I'll read this is sort of this is a winter poem.
Okay.
And it's called Winter Mermaids. Shadows flare like fetlocks from trees across the rucked snowfield. Morning comes here first to the high coves and saddles above the village, and sputtering rivers sunk in the cold below. The tops of yesterday's felling splayed across the edge of the field are scrolled with deer tracks. They feed in the dark on the meaty buds. The woodcutter is working early with clarity and purpose. His pouch of tools, scrunch and sawfile, and wool coat hang on a beech limb in the early morning sun above the snowdrifts. High winter continuum, one ice crystal stacked upon another and another. The deer, the wood, the man, the longed-for purification, the hope, the work, thrown off by last night's dream of winter mermaids, plunging under the snow, the liquefaction of their hair, their honed, bright black eyes.
That's really wonderful. I really appreciate you coming in today, and I hope people will pick this book up. It's called Pioneer Species, and it's by Ross Thurber. Thank you very much,
Chard.
Ross. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.